All right. Well, Andrew kind of hinted at it already, but I'm going to cover the story of Real Salt Lake. And I will eventually get to the point that Andrew was hinting at, where we will talk about Real Salt Lake against Chicago in the playoffs. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about before we get to that point. And so normally when I cover my stories, my history stories, I try to come up with some kind of a good opener, get the fans engaged, get them excited before we dive into the story. But for this week, none of that. All I ask is that you go to youtube.com, look up the 2009 MLS Cup Real Salt Lake versus LA Galaxy on the Major League Soccer channel, go to the 2 second mark, and bask in the glory of our soccer Lord and Savior. So, if you can remember all the way back to episode 175, we had covered RSL's first ever win. But a lot of that episode was also covering just how bad RSL was in their first ever MLS season. Their inaugural season was in 2005, which in terms of you listening to this now was ages ago. But for the 2009 RSL squad, it was not too far removed. The team is coming off a much better season in 2008 than they did in their first season in 2005. So momentum for them is moving in the right direction. The team also looks completely different from its first ever roster, with a combination of big names and players looking to make a name for themselves, such as Javi Mo, Jamison Olave, and Kyle Beckerman. Were they poised to continue the momentum forward and challenge for the Shield? Or were they headed in the opposite direction and set to miss the playoffs? Well, the start of the season seemed more like the former, as in the month of April, they won 3 of their 4 games to get them off to a great start. May, however, would see the team look much more like the latter of that earlier question. And if you've listened to past history episodes, you know this is normal. Teams have these ebbs and flows all the time, and the ebbs and flows would continue for RSL throughout the season, with really neither ebb or flow lasting for too long. I won't get into the details of the rest of the season, but what we do need to talk about is this final day race, because if we're keeping it PG girly in this podcast, holy guacamole. Someone may have to correct me on this because in typical MLS fashion, it was hard to follow. But I think the playoffs were determined by the top 2 teams from each conference automatically qualifying. And then the next 6 teams with the best record, regardless of conference, also qualified. So basically, the top 8 teams, regardless of conference, unless there was some freak instance where one conference was infinitely worse than the other. So going into the final game week, RSL is in 12th place, meaning they would somehow need to jump up 4 spots on decision day in order to just make the playoffs. Lucky for them, this is one of the closest races I have ever seen. The following teams were in reach for RSL, who was on 37 points going into the final game week. Colorado on 40 points, Dallas on 39 points, DC on 39 points, Toronto on 39 points, and New England on 39 points. Another factor working in their favor was that their final game was against Colorado. So they were at least able to control the destiny of one team that they could leap. RSL fans didn't have to worry too much about their own team doing what was needed, as they would dismantle Colorado 3-0, which was significant because it gave them the advantage in the goal difference. So now they've officially moved up at least one place. The problem is that they still needed a lot of help to get in. New England was not one of those teams that helped them, as they would go on to qualify for the playoffs after beating the Shield champions Columbus Crew. Outside of New England, though, the luck was pouring in. Toronto would get smacked by bottom of the table RBNY 5-0, which left them on 39 points and not even in tiebreaker contention. The same was true for Dallas, who lost to the New Boys in Seattle to see them finish on 39 points as well. The last team left who RSL needed to leapfrog was DC United, who was coming up against the KC Wiz, who, mind you, were completely eliminated from the playoffs at this point. DC was down 1-0 at the half before turning it around to take a 2-1 lead in the 82nd minute with a goal from Julius James and an earlier goal scored by Jaime Moreno. They didn't know this at the time because some of the other games had not been played yet, but if this result holds, RSL are eliminated. Sure enough, stoppage time rolls around. DC has still held on to their lead. It's looking bleak for RSL, but out of nowhere, they find hope. Right as stoppage time begins, KC has a corner. The ball is whipped in and nobody can claim it. As the ball rattles around, it eventually finds the foot of Roger Espinosa, who hits a shot at goal But in the way of him and the game tying goal is Brazilian center mid Fred. No, not the one that played for Manchester United, a different one. Fred on the goal line blocks the ball from going in, but does so with his arm, meaning that in stoppage time, we've got a red card and a penalty with a chance for KC to tie it up. Up steps Claudio Lopez, who hits a powerful shot through the middle to beat Cronin and tie the game. Elation for RSL fans and devastation for DC fans. Here's the thing, though. The game isn't over yet. There were 4 minutes of stoppage time, and there was a lot of time lost to the red card and penalty. So they play on after the penalty is scored by KC, and DC, in a last minute scramble to find a winner, finds the ball on the foot of Rodney Wallace, whose first effort with the left foot is blocked. The ball lands and finds its way to the right foot of Wallace now, who rifles one from the edge of the box and watches as it pings off the bar and comes out, near inches away from finding a winner down a man in extra time. Absolutely insane scenes. That would be their last effort, and they would drop points at the last minute to finish the season with 40 points. This meant that RSL Colorado and DC were tied on 40 points with only one playoff spot left. RSL had the head to head tiebreaker with DC and had the goal difference tiebreaker on Colorado as the two were tied on head to head. This meant after all of that, somehow, some way, RSL snuck into the playoff spot after being in 12th place heading into the final game week. So all of this, we're only now getting into the playoffs, which is where the real story is about. So RSL pulled off the miracle and got into the last playoff spot. But what that also meant was they were going up against the 2008 MLS Cup champions and the current season Shield champions. That's going to be a very difficult task. The conference semifinals are a home and away best on aggregate. Game one takes us to Sandy, Utah, as RSL play host, refed by my co-host's favorite referee. That's right, it's a Geiger show. This game was looking very much like it was going to be a 0-0 game and a good result for Columbus, about to head back to Ohio. But right when you start to doubt RSL, they slap you silly and prove you wrong. In the 88th minute, Robbie Finley finds a game-winning goal, meaning now RSL has the advantage going to Columbus and has the momentum, but still a tough task ahead. And a tough task it proved to be, as in the 35th minute, a GBS brace meant that not only were RSL down in this game, but in the aggregate as well. However, it would not take long for RSL to respond back, as in the 37th minute, Javi Mo would score to make it 2-1 in the game and 2-2 in aggregate. More work to be done, but some hope again. In stoppage time of the first half, a penalty for RSL gave them an opportunity to take the aggregate lead into the half, and that's exactly what they did with Finley scoring the goal. RSL just have to see it out at this point, but they do their fans one better, as Andrew Williams gets an insurance goal in the 74th minute to give them the lead in this game and make the aggregate 4-2. RSL would see it out to keep the MLS Cup dream alive. And now we pick it up to the point where Andrew had left us off. So we're going to see the conference final game between the Chicago Fire and RSL. And from here on out, it's just one game to decide who moves on, which means if it's tied after 90, it's extra time. And then if it's still tied after extra time, it's penalties. Buckle up. We're in for a barn burner. Just kidding. This game was 0-0 after 120 minutes. So here's the list of things that could have been done instead of watching this game. Build a puzzle, cook and eat a meal, touch grass. Okay, maybe not the last one. The meaningful part of this game is the penalty shootout. The first round of shots are both makes by Blanco and Mathis for either side. The Chicago Fire version of Brian McBride, who we covered in a recent MLS history episode, scores his goal, but Javi Mo misses his, giving Chicago the lead. The next round would be goals from both sides, with Conde and Finley scoring. Not many chances left for RSL to save their chances at MLS Cup, but this team loves to come through in tough moments. John Thornton steps up for Chicago, and his shot is saved, meaning that if Beckerman scores his, we're back level now, which he did. The next round would see both shooters score in Brown and Johnson. The next round after that would be matching again, but in the opposite direction, as both takers in Pause and as Espindola would miss, meaning we're on to round 7 of the shootout. Brandon Prideaux would step up for Chicago and see his shot saved. RSL with a chance to go to the MLS Cup final now. Their fate in the hands of Ned Grabavoy. who would step up and make no mistake playing the hero as he would score to send this improbable RSL team to the MLS Cup final. RSL was one step away from an improbable MLS Cup win, but in their way was one of the greatest MLS dynasties of all time, the LA Galaxy. For those that don't know what the team looked like, it has Landon Donovan, David Beckham, and most importantly, our USMNT hero, Greg Berhalter. This Galaxy team was also coached by arguably the greatest MLS coach of all time, Bruce Arena. Unquestionably a tough task ahead, but RSL is the team to make the impossible possible. Galaxy would be the first on the board, as in the 41st minute, the Galaxy would be on the break with Beckham on the ball. Just how you want it if you're a Galaxy fan. He plays it out wide for Donovan, who weighs his options and then hits a cross back post for the trailing and unmarked Mike McGee. The perfect pass finds the foot of McGee, who taps it in the cross to give the Galaxy the lead. Right out of the half, RSL gets a huge chance as Robbie Finley finds himself one-on-one with Donovan Ricketts, who comes up with a big save, but at the cost of his body, as Ricketts would close down Finley and collide. Both players would stay down for some time, but would ultimately stay in the game. Before that happens, though, in the 64th minute, Finley and Yura find themselves solo against 3 or 4 Galaxy defenders. But as they have all season, the MLS gods were shining down on RSL. And while Movsisyan's shot was blocked, it fell perfectly to the foot of Finley, who had an open goal and made no mistakes to level the score. The aforementioned injury to Ricketts would prove to be too much, as in the 66th minute, Ricketts would be substituted out for Josh Saunders, who would have to see out the rest of the game. The rest of the half was uneventful, meaning this 1-1 game was going to extra time. In the extra time, both teams would have a few chances, but nothing too threatening, which means we are off to penalties to decide the MLS Cup champion of 2009. Beckham would start things off by sending Ramondo the wrong way and scoring the first pen. Mathis would do the same for RSL to see the scores leveled after one. Greg, with infinite G's and infinite balls, would put his pen side netting past the diving Ramondo. In the same fashion as round one, Finley would again match his counterpart and score top corner past the diving Saunders. Round three would see Jovan Kirovski's shot saved by Ramondo, giving RSL a chance to create an advantage. Beckerman would have the chance to do so, but despite a decent pen, Saunders dives to make a fantastic save and keep things level. Donovan was next for the Galaxy, and in the spirit of his team's name, would send his shot into the Galaxy, as the ball would fly over the crossbar. RSL again with a chance to take the lead. Up stepped Grabavoy, who would get Saunders going the wrong way to give RSL the lead. McGee was next, needing a goal to keep the Galaxy alive, and that's exactly what he did, sending Ramondo the wrong way. RSL was still in the driver's seat, needing just one goal here to win MLS Cup. Andy Williams steps up and sees a weak attempt saved by Saunders, meaning round 6, here we come. Chris Klein and Chris Wingert share both a first name and also a goal in round 6 of this penalty shootout. Round 7 would see Edson Buttles step up and see a poor penalty attempt saved by Ramondo, giving RSL yet another chance to win the cup. This time it would be Robbie Russell with the chance to win it. He steps up and he sends Saunders the wrong way, putting the shot bottom corner and winning MLS Cup for RSL. One of the most improbable MLS Cup victories in MLS history, probably even to this day. So many steps along the way looked like their season would be done, but every single time they pulled it out, either by luck, skill, or maybe even a combination of both. No matter how you chalk it up, RSL are in the record books as MLS Cup champions.